Golden Iris Productions presents Missionary Family Adventures, Beneath the Volcano, Part 9, from the book by Mark F. Dennis. Introduction. This is the story of an American missionary family and their remarkable journey to Japan. It is a story of faith, family, adventure, and growing up between two cultures. It is the story of how an ordinary family from America found themselves living beneath one of the most active volcanoes in the world. The events you are about to hear are not fiction. They are real memories from a childhood spent in the mountains of Japan. They are stories of ocean voyages, mountain trails, train rides, cultural discoveries, and the experiences that shaped an entire family. To understand how we came to live in such an extraordinary place, we begin not in America, but beneath the shadow of a volcano in the Japanese Alps. Historical disclaimer. This series faithfully presents the writings and memories of missionary Dick Dennis. His observations about religion, culture, and society reflect his sincerely held evangelical Christian beliefs during the 1960s. They are presented in their historical context to preserve the authenticity of his family's story and are not intended as commentary on the beliefs of others today. The end of an era. As the summer of 1978 came to a close, Mark knew that life was beginning to change. Friends were graduating. Some were leaving Japan. Others were beginning college, careers, or starting families of their own. Childhood was slowly giving way to adulthood. This was the last summer before Mark would graduate from Christian Academy in Japan. He made the most of every opportunity to hike the mountains, ride his motorcycle, spend time with friends, and enjoy life in Karuizawa. Without realizing it, these would become the final carefree days of his youth in Japan. Graduation and goodbye. The following summer, after graduating from CHA, Mark celebrated with classmates before preparing for yet another journey. The Dennis family gathered together once more at Team Center in Tokyo. Even on his high school graduation night after the ceremony at school, Mark and many of his classmates danced into the late hours of the morning at the disco. The next morning, Mark showed up at Team Center where his parents were staying, smelling like a discotheque. After cleaning up, they were on a plane back to the States through Europe. This time, however, they were not simply traveling home. A new adventure was waiting beyond Japan. Looking ahead. In the summer of 1979, the Dennis family boarded a flight from the newly opened Narita International Airport. Their destination would take them first to Taiwan, where they planned to visit missionary friends before continuing on. It would become another unforgettable journey, one that included ministry, new cultures, and once again, the unexpected adventure of smuggling Bibles behind the Iron Curtain. Hong Kong. From Taipei, the Dennis family flew to Hong Kong, where they spent the night. After enjoying Chinese food for lunch, they boarded the historic Peak Tram, the oldest funicular railway in Asia. It carried them steeply upward to Victoria Peak on Hong Kong Island. From the top, they enjoyed a magnificent view of Hong Kong, its crowded harbor, and the distant hills toward communist China. After returning from Victoria Peak, the family took a scenic tour of Hong Kong's famous floating boat community. Thousands of traditional Chinese junks crowded the harbor, and entire families lived and worked aboard these vessels. The tour gave the Dennis children a glimpse of another side of Hong Kong, where many poor families lived in cramped conditions on the water. Flying to Bangkok. From Hong Kong, the family boarded a 4-hour flight over Vietnam to Bangkok, Thailand. There, they visited another missionary family and spent several days sightseeing and shopping. Bangkok was hot, humid, colorful, and filled with activity. For the children, One of the most exciting attractions was an alligator wrestling exhibition, where performers boldly handled the enormous and dangerous reptiles. Millie especially enjoyed exploring Bangkok's large outdoor markets. The crowded stalls were filled with clothing, fabrics, souvenirs, and beautifully made Thai silk. She purchased several fine silk shirts for the boys, along with some attractive blouses and skirts for herself. The markets offered the family an unforgettable mixture of brilliant colors, unusual aromas, and the constant sounds of bargaining shoppers. Back at the hotel, the boys spent much of their free time in the swimming pool, escaping Bangkok's intense heat and humidity. The pool had a diving platform approximately 15 feet high. Mark finally gathered enough courage to climb to the top. Looking down at the water far below, he stepped from the platform and plunged feet first into the pool. A sudden change of course. When the family arrived at the Bangkok airport, they heard troubling news about the American hostages being held in Tehran, Iran. Their Thai Airways flight had originally been scheduled to stop in Tehran, but the route was changed for safety. Instead, the aircraft landed in Karachi, Pakistan, for refueling before continuing westward. After spending about an hour on the ground in Karachi, the family continued to Rome and then Paris, France. In Paris, they left the aircraft and rented a Volkswagen van for a 2-week driving tour of Europe. Once the luggage was loaded and everyone had found a seat, the Dennis family began another unforgettable road trip, this time across Western and Eastern Europe. Into the Pyrenees. After visiting the sights of Paris, including the Louvre, the Arc de Triomphe, and the Eiffel Tower, the family drove south through southern France toward the Pyrenees Mountains, along the border between France and Spain. High in the eastern mountains, they entered the tiny country of Andorra. The air was cool and refreshing, and the mountain scenery was beautiful. From this little country, they could look toward France on one side and Spain on the other. After finding a place to spend the night, the family walked through Andorra's shops. Mark spotted a switchblade knife that immediately caught his attention, but Dick repeatedly told him no. Later, the family went out for pizza. It was quite different from the pizza the children knew, with only a sprinkling of cheese and a generous coating of olive oil. Across Spain to Madrid. Early the next morning, the Dennis family left Andorra and descended from the cool mountains into the hot, dry countryside of Spain. Several hours later, they arrived in Madrid. Dick had arranged for the family to stay with missionaries there and learn about their ministry. The visit offered another opportunity to see how missionary work differed throughout the world. While eating dinner with the missionaries in Madrid, the Dennis children were surprised to see their hosts drinking wine. They were even more astonished when the missionaries served their children a small amount mixed with water. Coming from a very different Christian tradition, this seemed unusual to the Dennis children and became one of the memorable cultural differences they encountered in Europe. After a day in Madrid, the family packed the Volkswagen van and drove to Barcelona. They stayed overnight and enjoyed some time relaxing on the beach. The following morning, they continued along the Mediterranean coast, passing through Nice on the beautiful French Riviera. From there, the winding coastal roads carried them through Monaco and onward into Italy. Traveling through Italy. After a brief visit to Francis Schaeffer's L'Abri community in Switzerland, the Dennis family continued through Genoa and drove south to Pisa, where they spent the night. The following day, they explored the famous Leaning Tower of Pisa and the historic buildings surrounding it. The children even had the opportunity to climb the tower. Afterward, everyone crowded back into the Volkswagen van and continued to Florence, where they spent the rest of the day sightseeing. That evening, they drove to a campground near Rome for the night. The following day, the family explored the historic city of Rome. Everywhere they looked, they saw reminders of the ancient Roman Empire, monuments, churches, fountains, and ruins that had survived for centuries. For the Dennis children, walking through Rome
brought to life many of the places and events they had studied in history and the Bible.
Beneath Mount Vesuvius. From Rome, the family drove several hours south to Naples, where they spent the night beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. The volcano immediately reminded them of Mount Osama back home in Karuizawa. Its familiar shape made the children feel as though they had discovered Osama's Italian sister standing beside the beautiful Bay of Naples. The following morning, the family drove through Naples and continued to the ruins of Pompeii. Nearly 2,000 years earlier, the city had been buried by the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Walking along its excavated streets, the family saw homes, shops, and public buildings preserved beneath volcanic material, a powerful reminder of what an eruption could do. Crossing the Italian peninsula. After visiting Pompeii, the Dennis family climbed back into the Volkswagen van for the long journey north to Venice. They crossed the Italian peninsula and followed the eastern coastline along the Adriatic Sea. Along the way, they decided to visit the tiny mountain republic of San Marino, one of the smallest and oldest independent countries in the world. After parking near the bottom of the hillside, the family made their way into San Marino's ancient walled city. They spent several hours wandering through its narrow streets, exploring the shops, and enjoying magnificent views of the Italian countryside. Before leaving the little republic, they had their passports stamped as a special souvenir of their visit. An evening in Venice. From San Marino, the family continued north along the Adriatic coast and eventually reached Venice. They spent the night there and explored the city on foot, visiting St. Mark's Square and wandering beside its famous canals, bridges, shops, and cafes. Venice seemed unlike any other city they had seen, with waterways taking the place of ordinary streets.
The first part of the journey toward Eastern Europe followed the high-speed European highway system. The little Volkswagen van carried 7 people and all their luggage, making it no match for the powerful sports cars that occasionally shot past them like bullets. As they traveled east from Venice toward Trieste, the farthest eastern city in Italy, the van's engine suddenly began to die. Trouble with the fuel pump. Mark knew a little about engines and managed to restart the van by placing his hand over the carburetor, helping it draw in fuel. The engine would run normally for about 5 minutes before beginning to die again, although it seemed to run better while traveling downhill. When it stopped a second time, Mark discovered that the fuel pump's pivot pin was missing. Mark remembered seeing a 2-inch metal pin lying on the engine when the van first stopped. At the time, he had not known what it was and left it there. Now the pin had disappeared somewhere along the highway. Hoping to find it, Mark walked about a mile back along the road, carefully searching the pavement, but the missing pin was nowhere to be found. As Mark returned to the van, he noticed an ordinary nail lying in the gravel beside the highway. It appeared to be approximately the same size as the missing fuel pump pin, so he picked it up. When he reached the van, he pushed the nail into the opening where the pivot pin belonged, and to everyone's amazement, it fit perfectly.
Mark told Dick to try starting the engine. Dick turned the key, and the little Volkswagen immediately came back to life. That simple nail kept the fuel pump operating throughout the remainder of their 2-week journey across Eastern Europe. Against all expectations, the heavily loaded van was back on the road, carrying the Dennis family toward the Iron Curtain. The next day, the Dennis family prepared to begin the boldest part of their European journey. Leaving the familiar tourist destinations of Western Europe behind, they would drive into Yugoslavia and enter Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain. Hidden among their belongings were Bibles printed in local languages, intended for Christians who had limited access to Scripture. Bibles and pickled pig's feet. The last city in Italy. Trieste was the last major Italian city before the Dennis family crossed into Yugoslavia. Their Volkswagen van carried 7 people, their luggage, and a hidden supply of Bibles printed in local languages. As they approached the border checkpoint, everyone understood the danger.
The guards would inspect the van for prohibited materials before deciding whether the family could enter the country. At the Yugoslav border, guards began searching the Volkswagen for contraband. They examined the luggage and carefully inspected the interior of the van. The family waited quietly, knowing that the Bibles could be discovered at any moment. Yet, despite searching throughout the vehicle, the guards seemed almost blinded to what was there, and eventually permitted the family to continue, Bibles and all.
Shopping in Yugoslavia. Meanwhile, the family visited a Yugoslav grocery store to purchase food for dinner. Reading the unfamiliar labels proved difficult, but Millie selected several items that appeared suitable for the family. Later, she opened a can that everyone believed contained tuna and served Mark the first portion. Hungry from the day's journey, he took a bite without giving it much thought. The moment Mark tasted the food, he spit it out in disgust. Whatever was in the can certainly did not taste like tuna. The family examined the unfamiliar label again and eventually discovered what Millie had purchased. Instead of canned tuna, she had served pickled pig's feet. It became one of the more humorous and unforgettable surprises of their journey through Eastern Europe.
Toward Budapest. From Yugoslavia, the Dennis family continued north toward Budapest, Hungary. Dick carried another supply of Bibles intended for Hungarian Christians. Having passed safely through the Yugoslav checkpoint, the family hoped the next crossing would be easier. However, when they reached the Hungarian border, the guards began an even more thorough examination of the Volkswagen van. The Hungarian border guards seemed determined to take the Volkswagen apart. They removed the hubcaps, opened the engine compartment, examined the air filter, and searched through the family's belongings. Dick became overwhelmed with fear, convinced that the guards would discover the Bibles and send him to jail. Yet once again, they searched everywhere without recognizing what the family carried.
Bibles delivered in Budapest. After the guards finally allowed them to enter Hungary, the family continued to Budapest. There, Dick delivered the Hungarian Bibles to the people waiting to receive them. He was deeply relieved that the dangerous border crossings were behind them. However, the intensity of the searches had convinced him that continuing with the original plan would place the entire family at even greater risk. Dick had originally planned to continue into Czechoslovakia with another supply of Bibles. After the frightening Hungarian inspection, however, he decided not to attempt another border crossing. Instead, he entrusted the Czech-language Bibles to the Hungarian Christians, who agreed to distribute them for him. With that decision made, the Dennis family prepared to continue their journey across Eastern Europe. Out from behind the Iron Curtain. After completing their journey through Hungary, Dick drove the family westward and out from behind the communist Iron Curtain. Crossing into Austria brought an immediate sense of relief. The tense border inspections were finally behind them, and the family could once again travel without worrying about the Bibles hidden inside their Volkswagen van. The Dennis family spent their first night in Austria in the historic city of Vienna. Although their time there was brief, they saw as much of the city as possible, admiring its grand buildings, churches, monuments, and elegant streets. Vienna seemed especially beautiful after the somber atmosphere they had experienced in Eastern Europe. Across Austria. Leaving Vienna, the family continued west across Austria. The scenery gradually changed as the road carried them toward the towering Alps. Green valleys, mountain villages, and distant snow-covered peaks surrounded them as their little blue Volkswagen van steadily climbed into the mountains. Their route took them through Innsbruck, a beautiful Austrian city nestled among the Alps. Surrounded by rugged peaks, Innsbruck offered some of the most spectacular scenery of the entire European journey. From there, the family continued through the mountain passes towards southern Germany.
Visiting the Stoltzfus family. In Augsburg, Germany, The Dennis family stayed with the Stoltzfus family for several days. The two families already knew one another because the Stoltzfuses had previously rented their farmhouse in Twin Valley, Pennsylvania, located below the Little Red Schoolhouse. The Stoltzfus family also took the Dennises to visit Word of Life Germany, located near Lake Starnberg outside Munich. The ministry reminded them of the Word of Life camps they knew in the United States, although the beautiful Bavarian setting gave it a character all its own.
Oberammergau. Dick next drove the family to Oberammergau, a picturesque Bavarian village surrounded by mountains. The town is famous for its Passion Play, a dramatic portrayal of the final days, death, and resurrection of Jesus, that the villagers traditionally perform once every 10 years. Neuschwanstein Castle. Another memorable stop was Neuschwanstein Castle, perched dramatically above the Bavarian countryside. With its tall towers, ornate rooms, and magnificent mountain setting, it looked like something from a fairy tale. The castle later became widely associated with the inspiration for Disney's storybook castles. Dachau. Near Munich, the family visited the former Dachau concentration camp. The preserved buildings, memorials, and exhibits confronted them with the terrible suffering inflicted there by Nazi Germany. It was a sobering experience, and one of the most serious and unforgettable stops of their European journey.
Goodbye to Germany. After several days of sightseeing and fellowship, the Dennis family said goodbye to the Stoltzfuses. Their remarkable journey through Asia and Europe was finally nearing its end. They left the little blue Volkswagen van behind and boarded a flight bound for New York, carrying home their photographs, souvenirs, and memories of an adventure that had taken them halfway around the world. For Mark, however, this journey represented more than the end of a family vacation. It marked the closing of an entire chapter of his life, the end of his missionary family adventures. He had grown up beneath Mount Asama, attended boarding school in Tokyo, explored the mountains and cities of Japan, crossed oceans and continents, and experienced cultures that most young people knew only from books. The lessons of those years would remain with him. Life in a missionary family had taught Mark independence, perseverance, faith, and the courage to enter unfamiliar places. The world had been his classroom, and every journey had helped prepare him for the life that lay ahead. Soon, Mark would leave home for college and begin finding his own way in a rapidly changing world. In time, he would establish a career, build a home, and raise a family of his own. New responsibilities and adventures would replace the childhood journeys he had shared with his parents, brothers, and sisters. Although this chapter was ending, the experiences of those remarkable years would never truly be left behind. The people, places, hardships, laughter, and lessons of missionary life had become part of who Mark was, and they would continue to influence the man, husband, father, and storyteller he would become. The Dennis family's travels were over, but their story lived on in the lives they touched and in the memories carried by each member of the family. For Mark, one great adventure had reached its conclusion, even as another, the adventure of building a life of his own, was just beginning. To be continued. Memoirs of a Missionary, Bringing True Light to the Land of the Rising Sun, tells the story of my father, Dick Dennis, and his decades of missionary service in Japan. Drawing from his journals, prayer letters, and personal memories, the book records the challenges, victories, and everyday experiences of sharing the gospel while living among the Japanese people. Many of the events presented throughout this series are drawn from these first-hand accounts. If you would like to explore the story in greater detail, simply scan the QR code or visit the book on Amazon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this presentation, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with others. For more content, visit my 2 YouTube channels. Mark F. Dennis at Golden Iris Knowledge Quest, where we explore physics, cosmology, science, and emerging ideas about the structure of the universe. And Mark F. Dennis at Golden Iris Religion Quest, where we examine religion, spirituality, biblical studies, Jewish mysticism, and the history of religious thought. Your support helps these channels continue to grow and allows me to create more presentations, books, and educational content. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.